Welcome back to the 2-Minute Warning. Today I'm looking at the Week 1 matchup between the Los Angeles Chargers and the Washington football team. But before getting to that topic, question for those of you viewing, of course, and the question is just going to be a simple one. Who's going to win this Week 1 matchup? And now, getting straight into the topic, I know it's way too early to make real, game previews, but when the schedule comes when the schedule comes out today, you have to at least look at it and give it some talk when it is day 1 of schedule release. And with this matchup for the Chargers, Washington, it couldn't be more of a unique yet fitting game for them, in my opinion, for several reasons. A, Rashawn Slater, former Northwestern tackle, is now at the LA Chargers, and one of the biggest perks and reasons he was so highly graded in college is because of how he dealt with Chase Young in college when he played against him at Ohio State. Now we see him in Week 1, Rashawn Slater, rookie, versus sophomore Chase Young, one-on-one matchup again. That is obviously a great reason, of course, but also this new offensive line as a whole. We love this offensive line if you're a Chargers fan, but looking at it, you've got Rashawn Slater, Daya Bushi, Corey Linsley, Matt Filer, Brian Bulaga, but Week 1, you got to see against a very tough defense, one of the best defensive line in the NFL between Deron Payne, Montez Sweat, Jonathan Allen, Chase Young. How do they do against some of those big boy defensive lines? We have to see, and I'm glad it's happening Week 1 in the NFL because there's going to be growing pains in this Chargers team, and I'd rather us have some, I don't want to say us, but I'd rather them have some growing pains against some of the toughest defensive lines, so that way when they possibly face a weaker one, they will be prepared instead of struggling against the weaker defensive lines and against one of the top ones in the NFL. Couldn't have been a better start. And if they show Week 1, day 1, that they can handle a defensive line like the Washington football team, then Chargers fans will know day 1 they have a bright future. Also, you're facing a quarterback matchup that you don't know what you're getting. Is it Taylor Heinicke, who's seemingly mobile, or is it Ryan Fitzpatrick, who's going to throw either 350 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 0 picks, or 350 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 3 picks? You don't know, and that is why it's so good for this young Chargers team that is so new, because they can't exactly prepare for it, and that obviously is not a great thing, how many wild cards are on this Washington football team for the Chargers to deal with, but it is good because we'll see their raw talent and how far that can get them. Looking at the matchup, though, I'm going to take the quarterback matchup in the Chargers' favor over Fitzpatrick or Heinicke, whoever it may be. Unless this team makes a huge trade for Rodgers, Herbert's easily going to win the QB matchup. Backfield, I think Antonio Gibson's a better runner, but I think Austin Eckler's a better receiver out of the backfield, so pick your poison there. You can't go wrong either way. Receiving core, Terry McLaurin, Logan Thomas, Curtis Samuel, pretty good size and pretty good speed, but then on the Chargers, you got Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Jared Cook, Josh Palmer. That's really a tough one. I think that's a preference thing. It's kind of size versus speed, in my opinion. Chargers got the size, and I think Washington's got a little more speed, so that's a preference. I think I would go with the Chargers if I know they're healthy, but I'm not going to argue against anyone that chooses the Washington football team because they have a good receiving core 100%. Offensive line, that's debatable. They're both, I don't want to say brand new. Washington's only really added one new guy in Timo Cosme, so they do have the experience. When it comes to whole offensive line, Brandon Scherf as well is a great guard on that team over Chargers, but the Chargers have so much raw talent. It's going to be experience and skill, somewhat skill, versus not much experience, but a lot more skill. So that's a really toss-up. A lot of these are going to be close calls, the backfield, the receiver core, the offensive line. This Washington team, I think, is, I don't want to say underrated, but I do think they are a better team than we think. I think they'll be a little bit better than they were last year. Last year, they're 7-9. I could see that switching and they be, 9-7 or 9-8 or 10-7 because of the 17 games. I think this Washington football team is not too bad if they could get the quarterback situation right. Looking at the defense, it's going to be tough. I mean, Washington's got, how good the front four are on the defensive line, and then they added Jamin Davis, how you ever want to say it, Jamin Davis, one of the two, I think it's Jamin Davis, at the linebacker core. They really needed a guy there, and they got him. Looking at their secondary, they added William Jackson in the offseason. They got Kendall Fuller. They got Landon Collins. Pretty good secondary when it comes to it overall, but Chargers as well, they can hold their own with new rookie Asante Samuel Jr., healthy Derwin James, Chris Harris Jr., Michael Davis, and as we know, free agency isn't over. Either of these teams can add players up front. I do think Washington's got a better pass rush than the Chargers when you consider all around. I think if you take the best player from each front line, Joey Bosa is better than the Washington's best player on that defensive line. But after Joey Bosa, there's an enormously large teardrop, whether you want to give it to Jerry Tillery or rookie Chris Rumph, whoever you want to give it to is the next guy on that Chargers defensive line. Whereas on the Washington defensive line, they're all relatively similar talent between Montez Sweat, Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen, Chase Young. They're all relatively similar. Like I said, Joey Bosa himself is better than any one of those guys, but overall depth, you do have to give it to Washington. But who do I think is going to win? That's obviously what you guys want to hear, what everyone wants to know. I think roster-wise, from head to toe, top to bottom, the rosters are very neck and neck and very similar, but there's a enormously large gap at the quarterback position favored in the Chargers' way that I have to give it to Justin Herbert. And the quarterback, of course, another variable will be experience and very well-rounded head coach Ron Rivera versus Brandon Staley, who a lot of Chargers fans love, but we haven't seen him coach an NFL game yet. How is he going to take on this Washington football team, this amazing defense, an experienced head coach, a wild card quarterback? We don't know, but I do think Justin Herbert is just such a huge upgrade at the quarterback position over what Washington's working with that I think he'll be enough to, I don't want to say carry this team, but give this team the big edge they're looking for in this matchup. But again, this couldn't be a better matchup in my opinion for the Chargers because there's so many wild cards that we're going to get a good feel as to how good this Chargers team is week one. They're going to be facing a good defensive line. How is the Chargers' new offensive line going to handle that? They're going to be facing a quarterback that might go for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns. And if he does, can they go toe-to-toe with that? Can Justin Herbert match that? I think he can. But with them not knowing what they're getting, facing a great defense, and having so many new pieces to their own secondary, to their own offensive line, and to their own head coach, it's just a good matchup for the Chargers team. It's not a cupcake game, and it's not the toughest game of the year. You know, they're not facing Chiefs week one, and they're not facing, whoever you want to call it, the Philadelphia Eagles week one. It's right, I don't want to say in the middle, we're right around above average team that we're going to get a good feel for the Chargers. I like this matchup for both teams. I could honestly see both teams making the playoffs. I like the Chargers in the AFC West or making a wildcard spot. And I like Washington fighting for the NFC East. Overall, great matchup for both sides. And whoever comes out winning, I won't be surprised because, like I said, a lot of these comparisons are neck and neck. But just strictly due to the entire jump in quarterback, you're going from a top 10 quarterback in Herbert to a bottom 10 quarterback in Taylor Heineke or Ryan Fitzpatrick, wherever you want to put them. I think they're probably bottom 10 compared to top 10. Rest of the roster, with it being so close, quarterback just sways it way too much. And I think this Chargers team will get a good win at an away game, and we'll get a good feel, how this offensive line is, how this head coach is, how this defense is, and how good of a year will be. I'm excited for the matchup. I'm excited for the season overall. I'll make a couple more videos on the full schedules release. If you guys want to, comment down below if you want to hear more about Chargers or other teams' schedule when it's officially released tonight. And as always, of course, answer the question today. Who's going to win, in your opinion, Chargers or Washington? And of course, guys, thank you for watching. I truly do appreciate it. 2-minute warning.